Hey guys, how's everybody doing? Justin, 5180 Oklahoma, DX1. I want to talk about a couple of things. Let's talk about a couple of things that's come up, and I had a buddy bring it up earlier. I literally made him a whole video about it, and I literally gave him a rundown because an individual told him some information, but I'm not going to say that the individual was wrong because I think the individual was trying to express something to my buddy and was trying to tell my buddy something that was important but had it a little bit confused. We're going to talk about antenna tuners, and you have what you call an ATU, which is an automatic antenna tuner. And then you have output tuners. So you have, first off, we're going to talk about two different kinds. We have an input tuner and an output tuner. Typically, your input tuners are ATUs, automatic antenna tuners that are in the transmitter itself. What these are designed for, guys, the whole sole purpose of an antenna tuner is to make a non-resident antenna, make the transmitter see what's not there. Let's tell you again. The antenna tuner makes the transmitter see what's not there. You might have an antenna that has 95, 100, 130 ohms, but you can make it see 50. Simple as that. That's all it does. It doesn't give you more power. It doesn't make you talk better. It makes the transmitter happy. Does the antenna tuner physically change the antenna? Does the antenna tuner change the antenna's impedance? No. The antenna is out of resonance and out of tune. It stays out of tune. The only thing that the antenna tuner's doing is making the transmitter see the 50 ohms that's not there. So it has a series of circuits that's inside it that tunes the input or the output and the input to 50 ohms of the That way you can take an antenna out in the field. You can take a random piece of wire or whatever, set it up out in the field, hook a transmitter to it that has an antenna tuner. The antenna can be anywhere in the SWR, and you can hit that button and it'll go, and boom, the transmitter says, okay, that antenna is okay. The antenna ain't changed. What the transmitter sees has changed. That's the number one thing that you need to remember about antenna tuners. They don't change shit on the antenna. They don't change shit on the feed line. They make the transmitter think something has changed, and it's all done internally through the circuitry. Number two, the antenna tuner, there's two kinds. We have an output stage tuner. An output stage tuner is going to typically be a more higher range of output. In other words, an output tuner ain't going to be 5 watts. It's just not. Typically, a low level input tuner, like a 20 watt tuner or a 5 or 10 watt tuner, is going to be used as the input stage. Obviously, you're not going to be running it through an amplifier. Now, I want to make something correct. I want to make something straight, and this is what come up, but we're not getting there. We'll get there in a minute. An output stage tuner is generally 300, 500, 200, 1,000, 1,500, 5,000. They can be big. Why? It's because the output tuner goes after the amplification stage. It goes between the final output stage and the radiating device, the resistor, the antenna. We can't take a low-level input tuner and put on an output stage and try to drive 400 or 500 watts through a 20-watt input tuner. Yes, they're the same type of device, but they work with different power ranges. That's another thing you're going to remember. Typically, an output tuner, not typically, always, they're either going to be built into the output stage of the amplifier for the output amplifier stage. So a lot of amplifiers have the tuner, output tuner in them. Obviously, it's the amplifier. So what comes after the amp? The antenna. An input tuner is typically in the transmitter because it's the input side. And it's generally going to be rated for the output stage of the transmitter. If it's a 100-watt transmitter, it's going to be a 100-watt input tuner. A 100-watt ATU. Now, I had a guy tell one of my buddies, you can't use an automatic input tuner and run an amplifier. Bullshit. Bullshit. You can run. This G90 right here has a built-in ATU. I can turn it on, and I can run an amplifier. What you don't want to do, and hear this out, guys, this is the mistake. This is where people get confused. You don't want to turn the antenna tuner on, turn the amplifier on, and then try to tune the input tuner with the amplifier on. And I'm going to tell you why. An ATU uses a loaded signal. It uses a continuous signal, a CW or an FM signal. All antenna tuners are based around a continuous carrier. If you try to use a 20-watt input tuner, ATU, and tune it keying through an output stage of an amplifier, it's going to produce whatever carrier signal, continuous. It's going to try to key up your amplifier. It's going to try to key up that full duty cycle and load and tune all at the same time. And yes, it could knock out. If you got more, which it would have to be a horribly tuned. If you was to say this is a 20-watt input tuner, and you was to do that, and say you somehow got more than 20 watts of input reflect, it would probably blow a cap or blow an inductor or blow some of a relay, probably take out a relay or something like that in the ATU. No, you don't want to take an ATU and put it into ATU tune mode through an amplifier. There's no need to, and I'm going to explain to you why there's no need to. An amplifier already has a tuned input and output. An amplifier already has a pretty flexible range of input ratio. They're already tuned and set for 50 ohm. There's no reason to put a tuner. You understand? Because the amplifier stage is already ready to see the 50 ohms. It's already designed. And in fact, they're flexible. All amplifiers, and people get paranoid about it, amplifiers work fine up to 2.2 SWR. People that tell you, oh, they'll blow up. Well, if the amplifier blows up with the 2 SWR, something's wrong with it, because the 2 SWR is not horrible. It's not the 1.2 or the 1.1 that we all want, but there's not, I'm telling you right now, as far as the physical working output signal, there's no difference between a 2 and a 1.5. There's no difference. I'll run a 1.5 SWR and put the same damn signal in as I do with the 2. Now, it's better for the circuitry in the amplifier to keep our input standing wave ratios, because we're producing heat. When we have a high standing wave ratio, we're producing heat, causing more heat, because all the output, all the signals not going, trying to make it out. But I think that's where people were getting confused in the forum that he was reading. You do not want to try to tune your tuner when you have an amplifier on. Now, remember, guys, when the amplifier's power switch is off, your transmitter doesn't see all that. If your station is set up right, and you have the X factor, and you have everything tuned on your station, when you have an amplifier in line and the switch is off, your transmitter shouldn't really see it. And if you really care and you're anal about things, it's not going to see it. My transmitter don't see my amplifiers when it's with it does it. It's just a freaking piece of coax. Because what happens is you got an input on the back of your amplifier and you have the antenna jack on the amplifier. Only thing that's linking the two is a short piece of jumper going through a relay, coming out, going back through and out the other. So when your amplifier is in line, you're only adding a short piece of coax. It's just going right through it. Now, when you flip it up in the on position, it's having to go through all the circuitry, through the input, output transformer, and yeah. But my whole point is, if your station's set up right and the amplifier's in line, your transmitter shouldn't really see it. And that's why there's no purpose in using an antenna tuner when you have an antenna that's resonant for the frequency occupation you're working. If you got a 1.2 or a 1.1 SWR, you don't need to have an antenna tuner on. Now, because all you're going to do is make the transmitter, circuitry in the transmitter, more circuitry have to come into line, because there's a lot of inductors and a lot of capacitors and a lot of stuff that it makes up an antenna tuner. And when you bring the antenna tuner into play, your RF has to go through all that before it makes it out and goes to the next part of the circuit. With that being said, that's important to have when you have a circuit that's way, way out of resonance, because all that circuitry makes it for a perfect match circuit. I just wanted to clear that up. Now let's get back to the output board tuners. Output tuners. And then we can talk a little bit about pass filters and what pass filters do. They focus on filtering out, but I'm jumping the gun. That's my ADHD. Slow down, Nelly. Anyways, let's talk about output filters. So output filters, output tuners. So an output tuner, if we come over here and look at my system, we'll use this as a reference. I'll have to get in here. Now let me turn the camera around and do it this. Well, I can't now. I'll have to do it like this. So I'll just do it this way. Let me get up here where you can see. All right, so let's look at this little, and this thing's had tons of stuff. This is, well, it's already a modified competition style before, and then anyways, you know what I use it for, so you know what's inside it. It doesn't have the typical what you'd normally have inside one of these. Most of this stuff is Class C. We'll talk about that stuff another time. Most of your CV amplifiers that you see on the market are Class C. We don't want Class C. And what we do here, we want Class A, Class AB1. We want bias. You got to have bias when you're running sideband, or you'll sound like dog dick. Of course, you can put bias in any amplifier. So if you have a Class C amplifier at home, there's no need to panic. You just need to learn a little bit about circuitry or go have it done, but put bias on it, you'll sound 5,000 times better. This is the input of this amplifier. Input. Comes out of the back of the transmitter, goes through my input meters, comes out, goes into the input. This is the transmitter line. This is the output side of this amplifier. So when I key the microphone, the signal, when the amplifier is in off, it just goes through here, goes through the relay, and goes right back out. Doesn't go through any of the circuitry. But when the amplifier is on, it comes through here, goes through a piece of relay, comes through the relay, hits the keying transistor. The keying transistor sniffs the RF, pow, turns the amplifier on. The RF comes through the input of the amplifier, hits the front end of the input transformer, gets amplified, that gain. So now you might have an input gain of just random numbers. Say you got an input of 2 dB. Now that 2 dB turns into, well, this amplifier here would be like, say, like a 10 or 13 times multiplication. So that 2 dB turned into 10, 12. Now it's going to come through, gets amplified. I said that wrong. It comes through here, hits the front of the transistors, gets amplified. Now the dB, the growth of amplitude is grown, hits the back of the output, comes back up, goes through the output cap and tuning circuit, comes through the relay again, goes back out, comes back out of the relay, goes through the output SO239 connector, and comes out, goes through the output meter, gives you a reading on the meter, comes out of that, goes out to the antenna. If you were running an output tuner, an output tuner, network tuner, it would go either here. If you were running it inside, it would go in here. A lot of people, the guys that are real serious, will get their real high quality ones that are made to go outside, and they go at the feed point, because the most effectiveness you can get out of any tuner is having it closest to the load, and the load in this point would be our antenna. So yes, having an output tuner between here on the bench, yeah, that's what most people do. But the real serious and big broadcast guys, the output tuner is up between the tuner and the feed point, right at the last chain. Because what it's doing, the output tuner is tuning all the feed line, making the feed line and all, it's tuning it all and matching it all. Once again, the output tuner is not changing the antenna. It's just making the network happy. There's a big long video. There's a bunch of rambling and ranting. Half of you not going to understand one thing I said. But the ones that do understand, hopefully you got something from it. Hopefully that got cleared up. The big no-no is you don't want to load your antenna tuner through an amplifier, and your high-power tuners always go after the amplification final stage. 73s, love you all. Keep the hobby up. 9-pound hammer. We're going to go in here and fire up the AM station. I'll see you.